I'm back with another one. So, this first story takes place in Ohio when my great grandmother was 8 years old. She had an uncle that had died recently, and this would have been around 1906. And his name was Abraham, but they called him Ham. So, this was her Uncle Ham. Well, this is the story about Uncle Ham's banjo. So when my great-grandma was about 8 years old, her uncle had passed away. Well, one night she was woke up to hearing banjo music. And she knew that her father didn't play banjo, so she was wondering whoever could it be. Well, she got up and walked to the room where the music was coming from. And lo and behold, there up on the wall was her late uncle's Ham's banjo playing "Oh Susanna" as plain as day. And she hightailed it out of there and ran out. I guess she was getting up to go to the outhouse anyway, but she got out of there and ran out to the outhouse as fast as she could. This next one also takes place with my great-grandma when she was little. And her mother had told her to go fetch some buckets of water down at the well pump. And it was after supper, so it was, getting near sundown. And she's got her buckets in hand, heading down the little pathway from the house out back of the barn, where the water trough was for the cows that they had. Well, she's going down the path, and she hears the old creaky well pump going. And she wondered, who's getting water? Well, as she rounds the corner of the barn, what does she see? Nobody there. And that water pump just pumping away like mad. Now, the thing about this water pump is it's the old crank pump that you have to crank. And inside the pump, the mechanism were those old little, it was a chain mechanism with the little cups that bring up the water. So you had to really crank that pump to get water to come out, which, she was absolutely in shock. So she dropped the buckets, ran back to the house, trying to tell her mom of what happened. And her mother wanted nothing to do with it. She scolded her for not bringing the water back and told her, you get down there and get that water. But she was too scared to go get them. But I guess she ended up doing it because she was probably more scared of getting spanked than anything else. So that's that story. The next story, there's a couple of times that they witnessed seeing what I'm about to tell you. This one is called The Lady in Black. And this also takes place on the Ohio farm. And I guess the people that owned the farm before my family, they witnessed seeing the Lady in Black years prior. So this, this one's an old, has been around for quite a while. So my great-grandpa and kids were waited in the car one Sunday morning for my grandma to come out and go. They were going to go to church. Well, Grandpa sees a lady in black coming from the barn pathway, thinking it's my grandma. Well, then, a minute later, here comes Grandma out of the house, and he noticed, he looked back over to where he saw the lady in black, and she had disappeared. So it wasn't my grandma at all. Well, the second time they saw her, my great-grandma was washing dishes, and the lady in black walked by the window, just floating by. And then the third time they saw her, I guess there were other sightings, but I don't know what happened. Grandma was gathering vegetables from the garden for supper, and she heard something, like footsteps. She looked up, and there's the lady in black standing there watching her. And then the lady in black just walked away. The next one, they called the paper horse. And this one took place on my great-grandpa's farm in Ohio. My great-grandma was washing dishes up after supper, and it was nearly dusk outside, getting dark. She heard a whinny of a horse outside and looked out the window to see a flash of white near the garden. And she thought, what on earth? They didn't own a white horse. So she went outside to see, and she could hear it breathing and, snorting and braying, but couldn't see anything. So she walked around to the other side of the garden, and there it was. A white horse, plain as day, standing there. So she grabbed a little pebble to throw at it to get it to run off out of the garden. But it was no use. As she threw it and hit the horse, it made like a paper sound, and just went right through it. She went and bent down to get another pebble, and by the time she looked up, the horse had vanished. And I guess they'd seen that horse on the property multiple times, and for the life of them, they couldn't explain, it sounded just like paper. So that was an odd one. Well, then, this one happened with my aunt, my father's sister. And this one took place in the old barn on the Ohio farm. And I guess it had been a Sunday evening. And of course, the family got together after church and had supper and visiting, and the cousins and everybody were there. Well, she and the cousins were out in the barn, and they were sitting there, and all of a sudden she heard a tapping noise from over on the other side of the barn. And she looked, and she could see up at the top window, it looked like like an old rag doll, tapping on the window, waving at her. And she tried to get the kids' attention. Look, there's a doll up in the window. But by the time they looked, it was gone. But they ran outside to see if, somebody have a ladder and playing a joke on them. And nope, nobody was out there. So that was always a big mystery. Now, when I went back to Ohio, I was 17 years old, just graduated from high school. I went back to the Ohio farm with my grandparents, my dad's parents. And we were there for 2 weeks. And the first thing that I thought was kind of strange was, so the first night, I was going to be sleeping on the couch the whole time that we were there. And the first night, I'm laying on the couch and I'm facing the back of it. And I felt this, they're going to bed. Everybody's going to bed. And then, a little bit later, I'm laying there and I felt this patting on my head, like a pat, pat, pat. And I thought, oh, my grandma or grandpa, it was usually the grandpas that did that to the kids. Oh, he's come to say goodnight. So I look up, but there's nobody there. And I thought that was kind of odd because, that's something that both my great-grandfather and my grandpa would do. And I just shut my eyes and went to sleep. Well, every night that happened, every night. And I eventually just got to where, I pulled the covers up over my head and figured, they're not doing anything bad. So I was kind of scared a little bit, but I thought, they're just whoever tucking me in at night. Well, then there was one day that my great-grandmother had a doctor appointment. So my great-aunt had to take her to that. And then my grandma and grandpa had their own business that they were taking care of somewhere else. And they figured, it'd be pretty boring for me to go. So if I wanted to, I could stay there at the house alone. And that's what I did. Well, I went out to the barn and, I was kind of looking around out there at all the old tools and machinery and stuff. And then decided to go inside because it was really hot out. And they had a great big door on the left end of the barn, which you can see in the photos, that had to slide to shut. So I had to really muscle it to get it open and shut. But I got that shut, turned around, and started walking down the pathway that leads to the house. And midway of, being in the pathway, there's a hot breath on my face and a whisper, Heidi. Someone whispering my name. And it sounded like my great-grandfather's voice, who I believe he passed away 2 or 3 years prior to this. And I'm like, that was weird. Did I really hear that? I got into the house and I thought, I'll watch some TV, while I wait for them to come home. And I sit down and turn on the TV, and as soon as I turned it on, it's fuzzy snow. And I thought that was kind of weird. And as soon as I did that, again, I felt the hot breath on my face and my name whispered, Heidi. And it sounded just like my great-grandpa. Shut the TV off, and I thought, I'm going to go for a walk. So along the roads, of course, we're in Ohio, out in the country. There's corn everywhere you look. So I'm walking, and I thought, I'm going to collect some of this corn and bring it home. So each time, I walked a country mile, literally. Each stoplight or stop sign to stop sign back there is 1 mile. And I walked 1 complete square, to get back to the house. So I knew I wouldn't get lost. I just kept turning right at the stop signs. And so each square would be 4 miles. So every time I stopped by the driveway, I would drop off the corn that I gathered and then go do it again. I must have walked 12 miles that day because I had to have gone 3 times around that great big square. Well, anyway, I got back to the house and I was at the end of the driveway and I found this big old tin coffee can and thought, oh, I'm going to keep busy while I wait for them to come home, staying outside, and grind up this corn and try to make cornmeal. I got the crazy idea to make cornmeal, and it worked. And that night for supper, my great aunt, helped me clean it up and sift through the cornmeal and all that. And it wasn't really fine, but, it was good enough to make cornbread. And so she and I made cornbread together that night. And it was the best cornbread I swear I have ever eaten. It was so good. Well, another happy, sweet memory I have is of my other grandmother on my mom's side of the family. And on Halloween night, she would always make a yummy beef stew and cornbread. And she made that beef stew so, her thinking that we would stay warm and cozy, if we ate that beef stew when we went out trick-or-treating, and it seemed to work. But that beef stew was so delicious, and just, she made it with love, and we had it with cornbread. But that's just a little Halloween memory that I have and is dear to my heart. And that's it. I thank you for listening, and we will see you again. Thanks for watching.